December 7th, 1941. At 7:48 a.m. local time, a wave of Imperial Japanese fighters and bombers appeared in the skies above the U.S. naval base at Pearl Harbor. Achieving complete surprise, their attack would cripple the Pacific Fleet, sinking and damaging 8 battleships. It destroyed nearly 200 aircraft and killed more than 2,400 Americans. Yet amid the destruction, hope remained. At sea during the attack were the Pacific Fleet's 3 aircraft carriers: Lexington, Saratoga, and Enterprise. A moment of fortune that would have a major impact on the course of the war the United States now found itself fighting. The days, weeks, and months following Pearl Harbor proved desperate times. Across the Pacific, the Allies were on the retreat. Reeling, the Allies rallied their surviving forces. On April 18, 1942, the U.S. struck back as Jimmy Doolittle led a surprise raid on military targets within mainland Japan, providing a tremendous boost in morale across America. More importantly, the Doolittle raid shocked the Imperial Military Command. To prevent further raids, the victor of Pearl Harbor, Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, was tasked with expanding the Japanese defensive perimeter and destroying the surviving American aircraft carriers. His plan: lure the carriers into a trap, then occupy a small American atoll at the far end of the Hawaiian Islands known as Midway. Yamamoto counted on the element of surprise as his forces steamed toward Midway. He dispersed his fleet with the plan of using those ships undetected by the Americans to destroy whatever forces may come to Midway's relief. Unknown to Yamamoto was the fact that the Americans had recently cracked the Japanese naval code and were aware of his plans. Admiral Chester Nimitz, commander of the naval operation in the Pacific, rushed his forces to Midway. The carriers Enterprise and Hornet were joined by Yorktown, which had been severely damaged at the Battle of the Coral Sea 1 month before. Additional aircraft were stationed on Midway Island in preparation for battle. With these forces and his knowledge of the Japanese plan, Nimitz guessed the odds were almost even. 4:30 a.m., June 4th, 1942. Imperial Japanese carrier-based bombers and fighters launched from their decks to attack Midway Atoll. The first wave would cause extensive damage, but the American air base on Midway remained intact. American bombers had begun their attack on the Imperial fleet. Confusion set in among the Japanese command, which could not decide whether to commit to a second attack on Midway or to target the American fleet just spotted by scouts. This indecision proved devastating, as a new round of American planes were now en route to the Japanese carriers. Though the initial attack did little damage, they kept the Japanese carriers off guard and drew their air defenses out of position. Meanwhile, 3 squadrons of American dive bombers that launched from the Enterprise and Yorktown were having difficulty locating the Japanese fleet. Short on fuel, Squadron Commander Wade McCluskey decided to continue the search rather than return to his carriers. It was a decision that would turn the tide of the war. By luck or fortune, the dive bombers arrived at a perfect moment. As armed Japanese aircraft filled the decks while being refueled, the Imperial carriers were extraordinarily vulnerable. At 10:22 a.m., the dive bombers from Enterprise and Yorktown commenced their attack. Within minutes, the Japanese carrier Kaga, Akagi, and Soryu were ablaze. Hiryu, the last remaining Japanese carrier, counterattacked, its bombers pounding the severely damaged but resilient Yorktown. Late in the afternoon, one of Yorktown's scout planes located Hiryu, prompting Enterprise to launch a final assault. Despite a strong defense, Hiryu was irreparably damaged, sinking the following morning. By the evening of June 4th, 1942, it was evident that the Americans had won a great victory. The Japanese had lost all 4 carriers, a cruiser, and almost 250 aircraft. Yorktown was eventually sunk. Still, Enterprise and Hornet survived, and the United States still held Midway. The victory at Midway has been called the most stunning and decisive blow in the history of naval warfare. From that moment on, it was the United States that would be on the offensive. Victory in the Pacific theater of World War II would still be years away, through terrible fighting on Guadalcanal, Tarawa, Iwo Jima, and Okinawa. And yet, that ultimate victory would not have been possible without the gallant stand in the face of long odds of a band of Americans at a small Pacific atoll 75 years ago.